I was listening to a podcast episode, and in this podcast episode, you talked about your ability and like being on the other side of giving up social media. And I was like, immediately once the podcast episode was over, I texted her. I was like, will you come on my podcast? Because this is so good. And first of all, I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
But I want to talk to you about all of the things related to this, because I know it's a struggle for so many. And I also believe in, this season on the podcast Priorities on Purpose, this one, it's all about being stuck. And I feel like social media has kept so many people stuck. And it's not because they're comparing or all that. Yes, they are. But it's just this like, I think being on autopilot and numbing out.
Yep.
In it. And so let's go. Talk to me.
Oh my goodness. There's so many angles in which we can start with, but let's just start kind of how God put it on my heart initially to walk away. So I've wanted to in different seasons, right? You're on a holiday break or a vacation with your family and you just want to unplug. But you don't, because there's those quiet times where you sit down and then you look around the room and everybody is scrolling. And so we're in December 2024. Okay, so in October of 2023, we had one of those seasons and I was so frustrated. But my frustration was myself, because I wanted something different for my family, but I wasn't doing anything different. And so it really became just this like internal reflection of like, I want my kids to be in the Word. Am I in the Word every day? I want my kids to be, making better choices, on their phone less, like yada, yada. Am I modeling that? So it was more or less the end of 2023 reflection. And one of the things that God was really putting on my heart was reading the Bible in a year. And so January 1, 2024, I started the Bible recap with Terry Lee Cobble. I'm almost done. It's so hard to believe. It's been fantastic. There's so much that's a whole nother podcast of goodness. But when I started in January, the Bible recap and just being in the Word every day, I struggled with this. It sat here right next to me, and I'd have my,
Your
Bible.
Phone, for those that are listening.
Sorry.
Can't see it. Yeah.
Yes. And I would look, oh, there's a message. There's a notification. There's something on there. And I was just so distracted. Now, every January and August, our church does a 21 days of prayer and fasting. And it's really just picking something, how can you spend more time with the Lord, become closer to Him through, removal of something so that you add more time with Him. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do no more social media. And so I think it started like January 4th. And I started and I failed. And it was a couple days in, and I realized it was the beginning of the year. And in my network marketing business, it's a health and wellness, and there were some things coming out, and I'm not fully plugged into that as much as I used to be, but I still am aware. And there were things that were happening, and I'm obviously in a community of friends who are also in the industry, and they're telling me things. And I had this like anxiousness of like, oh my gosh, I need to get back on because I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, okay, not really tapping into those feelings and the understanding of what I was like feeling, but I got back on. And I'd taken it off my phone, added it back on my phone. And this is Facebook and Instagram are the two main sources for me there. So get them back on my phone, still doing the Bible in a year, started setting some healthy boundaries for myself, which it's so funny. I don't know why when we're in our, 40s, it's still so hard to be like, go put your phone on the counter and leave it there for 20 minutes, right? Like we're just like children. We have to treat ourselves that way. Like you can do it. You don't need your phone right there. So then I started doing those, and setting limits. Like I will get on my phone, at lunchtime and check in and what's going on.
Okay, time out. Is this still during the 21-day fast?
Yes.
When you're supposed to be not on. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I failed it. So that's
okay, so that's when you like you did when you said fail, I heard like you slipped up. But no, you just completely stopped.
I did. And I just went back on social because it was what it was. And again, and I don't want to say funny, ironic. I don't want to use those words. However, I'm getting more anxious because I'm off. What am I supposed to be doing? Spending more time with the Lord in prayer, finding peace and rest. And I'm getting anxious and I go back to getting on social media. It's a drug, people. It's an addiction.
It is. Yeah.
It is.
I have during the election, I recognized that I was struggling. And one of the things I caught in the episode was you mentioned like you would go down these deep dive, like you would take these deep dives, these rabbit holes, and overconsume. And that's what I would do. And I recognize I'm like, this is not good for my mental health. Like, especially like, first of all, we're supposed to be getting enough sleep. I'm supposed to like, and like, that's when I would do it the most is at night. And so, before the election, I finally was like, you know what? I'm going to delete it all off my phone. And so I deleted it all off my phone. And there was a couple times when I put it back on my phone for just a like I can't even remember what I was doing, but for some reason I was like, let me put it back on my phone for a minute. But within 24 hours, I would be like, nope, that's it. Delete again, because I felt so much more freedom and lighter. Like I literally felt lighter without it. And I realized how much more I was getting done.
Yep.
As well. So I know we kind of skipped forward, but I want to go back to that moment where you had said you had failed. So you were you literally did. You just quit.
I did. And it was one of those where I'm like, you know what? Not the right time. That's what I told myself. And really, I don't
Is there ever a good time?
Right. But it's always in God's time because there was so much I learned from then until that was in January till June 1st when I actually went off.
Okay.
So in March, side note, I have 4 kids. One of my kids is always injured this year. That's a whole nother story. He broke his ankle right before spring break. So we couldn't do what we were going to do for spring break. We rerouted. We had this like family weekend where we just went to a lake house and unplugged. And I was like, this is what we need. There's just like, I for sure was going off social media for the whole week and took it off my phones, took a book, brought a book for my husband. And I was like, kids, you're playing games. We're unplugging. Like we need more of this.
How old are your kids?
Okay. 16, 14, 12, and 10.
Okay. So we're not talking about, 4, 6, 8, and 10. I'm sure there was not like, it wasn't like, okay, mom,
Yeah.
like, especially with the 16-year-old, he probably wasn't.
I will be real. Cause that's what I am. The first night I cried. Oh no. The first night of our vacation was awful. They fought so bad. Y'all they didn't know what to do. And I didn't take their phones away for the whole weekend. It was, let's unplug for a few hours. Like mom's going to bed at like 9:30, 10. You guys were on vacation. You can have an hour or two before bed to talk to your friends, do whatever you need to do. But when we're together, we're off of them. And I mean, the kids fought. We couldn't even play a game. Like, I mean, it was chaos until we finally settled into it, and we were only there for 4 days, but it took some time, but it was really good. So all that to say, there's detox involved.
For sure.
Even for a couple hours.
Book. I feel like I read a book because I did a digital detox for my kids. And I think there's a book literally called Digital Detox. And it talks about the fear as a parent of like what you're going to do when your kids don't have their phones, because we depend on we become reliant on them having their phones. And when they don't, like, not only does it mess with them, it messes with us because like that keeps them from getting on our nerves sometimes.
It does. I mean, I remember That's the hard part. It's like you ground your kid from their phone or their device and you're like, now I have to entertain them or I have to help them, lead them down the right path, what they should be doing because they don't have that distraction.
You have to parent.
Yes, which is, that's an old different conversation around teenagers.
Yeah.
So I took that week off, that spring break off of social media, came back realizing I loved it and I wanted more of that. But we were podcasting, still in the end of our, finishing out our season. And my co-host and I, we take off every summer just to be with family and kids. We're stay-at-home moms as well. So very busy shuffling kids and doing other things. So we end our podcast at the end of May. And at the beginning of May, I was like, June 1st, that's my date. I'm going off June 1st. This is when I'm signing off. And it was going to be a summer sign off. That's what I was doing. And just through May, really just kind of set myself up, because my greatest advice to anyone who spends a lot of time on your phone is, if you are going to remove social media, you need to fill it with something that is good. Otherwise, you will just go to another coping, numbing addiction.
Substack. That's what I found myself doing. I started
in June. That's what I started doing, was reading bloggers. I was like, here I am still consuming.
And then I went to Reddit.
Oh, funny. I haven't found that one yet.
Yeah. And it was like, I would Google something and it would take me to Reddit. And I did not download Reddit because I knew that was a slippery slope. But when I took it off, for the election season originally, I went right to the bloggers. Like, I went to still consuming all of this information.
It's really funny that you say that, because I've already forgotten about that phase of what happened. But I had people I loved and followed and respected on Instagram specifically. And I wrote their names down when I went off just to follow them. And I found a few of them on Substack, and I started still consuming their perspectives, their worlds, their information, to still be influenced by them, because it became a way for me. I loved being influenced and encouraged and motivated and all that. I saw it out on social in a way that it became how many of you wake up in one morning and you want to get on your phone and check on someone that you have seen? We have a local situation here that is national, and the mom has lost all 4 limbs through a tragic birth experience. And it is something that you have that passion and burden for someone, and you pray for them, you do get attached. Now, those things I still believe that's where there is still some goodness in social, is being able to be a part of a community that is loving on others. Even in the hurricane season, someone was telling me about the guy who wanted to make it through Hurricane Milton on his boat. And that he was going to be arrested if he stayed on it. Well, the kids, they'd found him on TikTok. Everybody was literally waking up, finding out if he'd made it through the hurricane. I'm like, this is what our world is. We're consumed with others' entertainment, other people. And again, that's Netflix, that's social media, that's TikTok. It's all the same, but we're seeking outside stuff for that internal gratification, that joy, that laughter, that love, that peace. And that's not where it comes from. It comes from the Lord. And that became such a struggle for me. Now, going off in June was awesome. Okay. I knew this was going to happen. The first 2 weeks, I ran out of the gates attacking all the things I wanted to do. I made lists. I finally have a normal email where I don't have a red bubble of 14,000 emails to be read. I started doing things, cleaning enough photos and videos on my phone that were just overkill. I need to do that again already 6 months later, but just need to do some of that updating, things that I always just didn't have time for, but it was still in my hand. I was just doing something else on it, and so a lot of those things I started those first couple of weeks, created my list, started getting active in areas in which I wanted to. And then some of the stuff started to set in of what I was missing. And it was weird. So I have this Bible study. There's 6 of us. We've been really close for years and we do a lot of things together. And we would get together like for our, monthly brunch or whatever it was. And they'd all be talking about something I didn't have a clue about because I wasn't on social. And I'm like feeling like left out, which I'm not someone who feels left out. Like my family alone is enough. Like I don't get offended when I'm not invited to something. And I don't have time to worry about that stuff. Right. But there was this weird, uncomfortable feeling of not knowing what was going on. And so I had to find ways to like be more assertive in those areas. Like with our Bible study, like if there was something that our family did, I would just reach out and tell them and be like, okay, send me back a snapshot of what's going on in your life or what's going on since I'm not on social. Like I had to start saying those things and asking those questions because when you go and post on social, you're like communicating to everybody that you think cares what's going on. You don't think
the crazy thing to me though is that people think that you've seen it just because you've posted it. And just because you've posted it does not mean the people have seen it.
No.
I have a really good friend and I told her, I saw one of her posts that had said something about like, she was struggling and she had posted it on social and I'm like, I thankfully saw that post, but I most of the time would not see that. Like reach out to me.
Yeah.
Like don't expect me to see a social media post because I'm probably not going to see it. Because even if I do have it on my phone, I'm not going like I'm probably consuming reels, not my friends' news feeds.
Yeah. It's true. Well, and you think about like the overconsumption is in many areas. You've already mentioned the political stuff that was going on during election. You consume what's going on in your world. So mine is like moms of teenagers and just, reels about that and, perimenopause and hormones and health and healing. And then you get on the recipe kicks and it's saving the recipe and everything. So whether like, no matter what it is for the day, there is something that will fill it.
Yeah.
So that is where, I started realizing when I was off that if there was something that I needed, I had to seek it from something. I had to work harder at it, which was good because it helped me find books. I do have a couple new podcasts that I listen to, but again, the nice thing about podcasts, it's AirPods. I'm getting more done because I can listen, which I've always kind of done, but I listen more while I'm doing laundry and dishes and organizing pantries or something, it's active learning versus sedentary, just sitting and scrolling learning,
I will say one thing that I had written down that I wanted to ask you was, what do you think, looking back, in the beginning, it was really hard for you to like recognize and felt like you were missing out on things that were on social. But now that you have been off of social for so long, do you recognize the things that you were missing out on that was literally in the room with you or available to you that you may not have seen because you were consuming and on your phone scrolling?
Mm-hmm. So much. And the biggest aha was in June or July, our pastor did a sermon series on transformation. And it was just like transforming you to be more in the image of God. And it's like, what's holding you back? What are the influences over you? Or, where are you of the world, chasing culture and all of that. And there was something in his message, and I can't remember what it was that he said. And afterwards, and I went up to just kind of validate him. And I said, you want to know the one thing that has changed for me the most is when I am doing anything not caring if I have my phone to take a picture or a video to have content for later. Like, why? I mean, I was never someone who was like a full-on influencer. It wasn't a for my job. It was just the way I did things because I lived away from my family. I lived away from my college friends. I lived away from, once we moved here 8 years ago, from my Chicago friends. So it was always just putting it out there to share, obviously with good intention, to just encourage people. And I am very real, like we talk about, like, and I want people to know that, like, hey, they're not alone, right? Like they've got someone who's in it with them, like in the trenches of motherhood or marriage or whatever. So I've always put stuff out there. But then it became something that I was doing without even realizing what I was missing. Like I didn't know that I wasn't like being present. Like I thought I was, like I always thought I was really intentional with my family and kids. Like, and even though I'm like videoing and posting, and when they were younger, that was kind of easier. And then when they got a little bit older, and then a couple of them got their own social media, and then it was like, Mom, why'd you put that out there? Now, here's the thing. I have always asked my kids for permission if it was anything like personal. If it's a family picture or whatever, guys, you're my family. You're gonna be on there with me, like. But if it was anything specific about them, and then it became like, Mom, you're cringy, and that's just that they just didn't love a lot of what I'm sharing at some point.
Yeah.
Like, well, now you're gonna have to deal with it. But it did become something that was like, this isn't working for me. This isn't working for them. And what's the purpose in it? And then like the questions really started coming when I was making the decision to go off was, is there purpose in this anymore? And I had pulled back a lot from my social media, or from my network marketing business and sharing, because we had started the podcast about 3 years ago. And that really became my passion. My co-host and I, Tori, we absolutely love it. We spend so much time, just coming up with ideas to share. And, we've had so many incredible guests. We just had our 100th episode. Like we've put a lot of time and energy into it, and we love it. And so that's really where that time is spent. But in that, as I was pulling away from social, I'm like, this is hard because I still want the podcast to be shared, but it's a different avenue. We still share on social. We have our little tricks. I don't have it on my phone. I don't get on social media. We use Business Suite, which is like a service basically that will post for you, kind of schedule things. I've had to a couple times get on there to like get something to respond to people or someone. And I will tell you, it's triggering. I recently, it was like a month ago, I had to get on there for something for the podcast, and I saw a couple things, and I scrolled just to see like what it was. And it made me sad, more or less, that not that I'm sad that I'm not on it, but sad that in the world of social media, you think relationships exist that don't. And that's really hard to say out loud and really hard for people to probably hear. But some of those relationships.
Say that again, because I don't.
So the relationships that you think exist on social media don't really exist. They're not really real.
Tell me more.
So you engage in people's lives, in their stories, and in posts, and you comment, and you're involved in them. But for someone who's left, like, they don't know that you've left. Like 4 months ago or 4 months after I was off, I've had people come up to me that I know locally, right? They're like, oh, I haven't seen much from you lately. What have you been up to? And I was like, well, I went off social media June 1st. And they're like, oh, you did? Like, they didn't notice, which is fine. It's because people aren't on social like looking for you. They're on social for themselves. And so it's something that like the sad part that I felt was like, I don't know much about those people anymore, but I also haven't heard from them in 6 months. So that's okay. Like there are some mutual relationships that were only social built that have just fallen away. Social did bring some of those relationships back together that were college. And I made a list before I went off social June 1st. of who I wanted to stay in touch with over the summer. And I messaged them all. And I was like, listen, just because I'm going off social media doesn't mean that I want us to stop talking or staying engaged. And so I've stayed in touch with a lot of really good friends that way. But then on the flip side, I was just going off for the summer. I was not going back like I intended afterwards, or made the decision afterwards. Just the freedom I felt and just the peace that I felt from all that really caused me to not want to go back. So yeah, some of those relationships just kind of fell apart. So it is weird because we talk about the detox of the 2 hours of detoxing digitally. Like there's a lot of aftermath that still comes after of going off of social media. Like, especially if was something like it was for me, that it filled something,
Yeah.
you know?
I think it does. There's so many things that you said. I'm like, oh my gosh, as someone who was in direct sales for a really long time, and you have a network marketing business, so you definitely get this. I think we meet people in that industry that we join groups and they're our peers, and social media helps us like stay connected. And so you think that's like a real connection, and I have found that even before, like even on social media, but like when I left, and I hear this from several people, that you think it's real, and then when you leave or you distance yourself a little bit, you realize like you only had this one thing in common. And so that's not like, it's just not. And
Not
I
enough.
think there are some things that it's just for a season, and that's fine. But another thing that you said is like, when I first started posting on social, it was because I moved. And so it was with really good intentions. I had little kids, and they said cute things, and it was fun. And I share that, which my kids now, because I don't actively, even though, before, when I still was on social a lot, I stopped posting because I felt like my kids compared. Well, so and so you posted them more than you posted me. And for that reason, I was like, you know what? I'm not posting any, like, if you're going to read too much into it, I'm like, I'm not posting any of it. And so, but now, like my younger two, they're 13 and 16. I will say, they love going back and seeing like those videos when they were little. And they will spend hours like looking at all those videos. And so part of me is a little sad that I don't post that, but I'm like, just go through my photo album, because I probably still took pictures, but also that idea, like, I don't know about you, but like, we're about the same age. So did you grow up with someone taking videos of you, like with the old fashioned camcorder?
I've got them. My grandma, she had the big old VCR recorder, up here. She was at all of my things. And mind you, we have the player to play them, and my kids have recently watched them.
I love that.
Fun of me a lot.
So, but think about it. Like, if we were to be more fully present instead of having, because most of the time, like when we are recording for content, there's so much that it no longer really matters, and it becomes noise. But if we have, like, I look back and it's like on vacations, my dad would video us. My baptism, there was a video. Games, there were, I didn't play sports, but my sisters did. There was videos. My graduation, there's a video. My wedding, there's a video.
Milestones, big things.
Yes. So if we could like pull back and be like, let's just live in the moment. And, like even Christmas, like Christmas might be a time where, like that is fun to go back and like see what you got for Christmas in 1989, think about that for our kids, so they could still have that experience, because I do think that's special. But instead, like, you can't have that when you're videoing every
everything.
second, every
Mhm.
day, or multiple times per week, and taking all the photos, it just becomes noise.
Yeah.
And another thing that you said that I really want people to hear is that um in the very beginning you said you wanted a change for your family and you recognized that it needed to start with you. And
Mhm.
so if you wanted them to do something, you had to be willing to go first
Yeah.
and do it first. And so that right there is so pivotal. And like, if you want your kids to be in the word, we have to ask ourselves, like, are we in the word?
Mhm.
And if we don't want our kids on their phone all the time, because I think that's something that, whether we're on our phone all the time or not, we recognize, like, like, we don't want our kids on on theirs all the time.
Yep.
But are we?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I can think of, when I took a pause in my business, because when I took a pause on my business, this is 2018, right before I moved to Kentucky, I recognized that my kids' mental health was not in a good place,
Mhm.
and my mental health, for the record, was not in a great place.
Not when you're taking
And
care of somebody's.
yeah,
I know
and
that.
we were in the process of moving. Eric, my husband, had already, like, moved, and so he was coming back on the weekends, and so I had the ability to hit pause on my business for 3 months. And so in doing that meant that I didn't have to be on social media all the time. I didn't have to be, like, at that time I was social selling, like, really hard. Everything I sold was pretty much through social media, which
Mhm.
meant I was on social media all the time.
Yep.
And when I was able to hit pause and not be glued to my phone or glued to my computer, the conversations that I was able to have, that's when I recognized that one of my children was struggling with anxiety and was really having a hard time. I
Mhm.
didn't know what I didn't know because I was constantly, like,
Mhm.
on my phone versus present with the people that were in the room.
Mhm.
And I think that whether we want to, I think we all want to make an impact. And sometimes we're so focused on making this big, massive impact. And I have this on my phone, actually. It says, if you want to impact the world, start with those that are in the room.
Mhm.
And it's so true. Like, how are we impacting those in the room? And so many times I think we're looking for other people to validate us,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
really, no. That is false. Like, we shouldn't even be doing that.
Mm.
But we go to social media to fill a void, to feel validated, to give all of this wisdom or whatever, when maybe there's people in the room that you could be having a conversation with, right? We're chasing culture. Like, think about, like, you also said something about the influences,
Mhm.
and you kind of went a different place than I thought, because I thought you were going to talk about how, like, you recognize that, like, you didn't need their influence. You didn't really say that. So I would love for you
Well,
to take
I
a
think,
minute
I
on
mean,
that.
it took a while for me to realize that, you know? Um, I think the influence in which I was getting was just their validation, that, like, what I was thinking and feeling, whether it's my health stuff, was, like, normal, on track, right? Like, this is, and then a couple of the parenting, women, I should say, the teen parenting, I would hear something, I'm like, "Okay, I'm doing," and, I'm handling that situation. So I think it was more like they were influencing me in a validating way.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, one of the things that you said was just the, like, taking the pause. I don't think I would have fully received the benefit of walking away if I hadn't already paused. That spring break, when I paused, was when I knew I wanted to walk away. So, like, I encourage your listeners to take a pause, whether it is the holidays or the first part of the year, and give yourself that, like, tiptoe in. It's like when we're trying to work out or eat healthy, or, like, doing the Bible in a year, like, that is, like, a really big, bite to chew, right? Like, just a big chunk to bite off. And I tried it 3 times before I actually did it. And it was that third pause that really told me, okay, set yourself up because you're going to do it. And that was when it was like, okay, Tori, with podcasting, I'm like, I'm going off social. This is what I'm doing. And I love that my co-host about 3-4 months after followed suit. Not for the same reason at all, which has been really fun for us to like navigate how we're doing business and, our podcasting together, being on the same page with it. But I would say that, it really is that like figuring out what you're missing in what the void is that the social media is filling.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I mean, I knew that it was just my phone was in my hand too much. And I will also say there's 2 books. I want to go back to that. I started Anxious Generation on my break. Anxious Generation, John H. I can't remember his last name. It's phenomenal. I'm not actually even finished the book yet because it is a lot of statistics and a lot of information, but it really, really breaks down what is happening in our world with teens and when the iPhone got in hands and when Instagram came into the world, and just how we got front-facing cameras on the phones and just really how our worlds have changed because of that. I started that in March. So there's so many pieces of the puzzle into how I got here, but I started that in March when I was on my pause and realized that I needed to figure out again my own time and space and comfort with my phone and what's right. And because again, they are wonderful pieces of technology that really rule our world.
Right.
And they're good. But it was like, okay, what do I need to do differently to teach my kids? And then when I went off, I made that decision June 1st. I started a book, funny enough, called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
I love that book.
Yes. I listened to it all summer and it really was validating having gone off social. So that was also a piece that like, if you are looking to pause, take a pause and start that book because it will just give you more purpose
Yes.
to not be on social so much.
Yeah.
And I mean, I absolutely loved that book. And one of my favorite lines that he says in the book is if the enemy can't make you sin, he'll just make you busy. And that's what social media did. I'm like, I'm busy. I'm so busy. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. But if you would look at my screen time, it would tell you that I wasn't busy. I was on my social media.
Yeah. I think, oh my gosh. Yes. First of all, I read Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Like, I can't even, like, that's a book I recommend to everybody. I'm surprised I didn't tell you about it when we were coaching.
You
because
probably did.
I had already listened to it. And it's, once you read it, like every little thing, like one of the things that drives me nuts is like when my husband is driving and we're in the car and he's in he's in a hurry when he's not even in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Like he's just constantly like in this rush. Uh-huh. And I'm like, man. And it kind of reminds me of this other part I wanted to talk about when it comes to our using social media, and that is it's our nervous system. Mm-hmm. I think we don't recognize that our nervous system is so in a weird place and dysregulated that's what we're using social media for. We're using that to kind of soothe or calm ourselves, which is not healthy, and it's not the way God created us, but it's kind of that mind numbing thing that we go to. And so I think of whatever it is that got us, I think we probably, most of us got into social media for good reasons in the beginning, but then something maybe happened that gets you in this, like, where that's all you're doing, the pandemic, for instance. Maybe it was during the pandemic that you got caught up and just sucked into this constant scrolling and, numbing out with social media. And so there are other things that you can do that are going to support you and be productive. That's not like that, in my opinion, is stalling. It's just stalling.
It is. And it's funny that you say the whole, I think about it like this morning. This is just kind of on the same topic. Like, there's other things you can do, right? Braylon, my youngest, who's 10, on the way to school today, we're going back to my family, which is in the middle of Illinois, live on a farm, and after Christmas. And she's like, what are we going to do when we're there this time? You know, like every trip. Like, I'm like, well, we're celebrating family. And she's like, Mommy, what did you do when you were a kid when you would go outside and play? This was our morning conversation on the way to work. I'm like, I used my imagination. Like,
they don't even know how.
I'm like, I skipped rocks. I chased animals. I ran around barefoot. Like, I rode bikes. And she's like, I don't even like to be alone outside at my parents' house, you know? And I'm like, it's so funny that she says that because that's where my peace comes from. Yeah. I'm like, I could stand outside with my feet in the grass, listen to the birds, hear the wind, some animals, like just the smell, like the smells like that, like, but that's how I was raised. And I said, funny enough, I'm like, we lived in Chicago when all my kids were born in Chicago. And now here, but I'm like, they're city kids, sounds, noises, trucks, you know, like trains. I mean, they're different. And so when you go take them to such a peaceful place, there's an appreciation for it, but just different, right? So I think it's funny you're saying, like, if you remove social media, there's something else to do. What she asked me this morning is the fear people feel. Like, if I'm not on social media, what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, people have been so out of rhythm, you know, that like y'all can do a puzzle and it's okay. Like, I mean,
I've been dying to tell you this, that one of the things that we're doing for this season is it's an Advent puzzle. So like there's 24 puzzle, like it's 1,000-piece puzzle, I think, but it comes in these tiny little boxes. So it's broke up into like smaller puzzles. And when it's completely done, it makes this giant puzzle.
That's
and
awesome.
It is the coolest thing. I have not done a puzzle since probably like for the record, probably the only puzzles I've ever done are the like 12-piece, 16, maybe 20-piece puzzles with my kids.
Yeah.
Or maybe 50-piece, which was the United States of America with each state.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably like the most I've ever done. But I am finding so much joy in just sitting down and putting, like, it is doing something for my brain. I'm telling you, it's like this, the amount, like, it just feels lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it is these rhythms, this creative place that I get to go and just be still and put these puzzle pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the record, my daughter and I, like, and even my husband got in on it. Like, we're not doing it the way we're supposed to. We eat, like, sometimes, like, you know, he takes 2 and I take 2 and we start with 1 and then we're like, okay, let's do another one, you know? So we're doing it that way. But I do love that it's not overwhelming because they're all in these.
I might have to do that one for next year. I love puzzles. It's like, it's my favorite, like wintertime, like holiday wintertime activity. Like,
I need to find another, like, I'm already like, what puzzle are we going to do next?
Yep. I love it.
I race, like the competitiveness in me.
Oh yeah. I'm still competitive in all things.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, let's see who can get it done first. And my husband finished first and he's like, I won. And I was like, we're not racing. And I was
the one you were racing. That's how it works in our family.
Later, I told him, I was like, so, I mean, I said we weren't racing but you know, like I was trying to beat you. He was like, I know, I could see how fast you were working, you know? And so, but this, like doing puzzles or even coloring or crossword puzzles you know, that's when I started looking at, like, I wanted to learn something. So like I've learned to make bows. But I did have to go to YouTube for that. Or like just, you know, paintings, like I wanted to DIY something, going out and doing yard work. I've never been someone who wants to do yard work, but I have found that, like, I love being on the lawnmower. You cannot mow the yard and be on social media. Did you know this?
Yes.
Now I can listen to a podcast or a book.
Right.
But like my husband must be printing something because all of a sudden the printer started going off.
I can hear it.
It scared me to death. But anyway, so like there are so many different things to do. I love that you said, and we have to wrap up. Like you went into giving it up with a plan. And so
I'm so type A.
but I think that's so helpful to recognize what are you going like that sets you up for success.
Yeah.
And you can focus to do anything on your list if you take time to make a plan. As someone who is a natural fly by the seat of her pants girl who never made a plan, I have learned that with a plan, you can do anything. And so taking that time to make a plan means that you're more likely to be successful. And so figure out what you're going to do to replace it, and think of things that maybe you've wanted to do, but you haven't done. And also look for the things. Like one thing I recognize is like when I'm really stressed out, that's when I want to go to social media.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
And look for the things so you don't just fill the void with something else, like I did with the Reddit and the Substack.
And have accountability.
Yeah, that's really good too.
Because, it is accountability. Like my husband and I did it together for the summer, which I was in asking my husband to do it. It was for the both of us. Like we each had different things. He's a TikTok scroller and I was the Instagram social media girl. Yet he runs a business as well. And so that was really difficult for him. But he realized like the cool thing for him was his business didn't change whether he was on social media or not. Like his business is in
I love that you say
other
that.
areas, Now, mine wasn't set up to go up or down because of just my distance that I've had in it, because of how much time and energy I've put in podcasting and different things that way. But it really was like, I want people to give themselves grace if they try it, because you do have to realize how addictive it really is. It's your attention, your time, your even your emotions are connected to social media. So I mean, I'm 6-7 months now without it. And I'm still having certain things that are coming up that I'm working through, and I think I want to be an encourager that it can be for good, and it will be hard, just like all things.